Howard Brennan, JFK assassination witness, who eventually identified Lee Harvey Oswald as the man shooting from the 6th floor window. And Howard Brennan sat on the wall here in the Zapruder film, and he's still sitting there as the president starts to move behind the Stemmen sign in the Zapruder film. And then after the assassination, he went to tell the police what he saw. And here we have a picture, a photograph, apparently showing him on the steps. That's where he talked to the police, and that's where they kept him for a while. And then eventually he is taken into Inspector Sawyer's car, and we can see him entering the car here. And then we can see him sitting in the car talking to Inspector Sawyer. And at this time, although you can't see him in this photograph, Amos Ewens is in the back seat. And then when Forrest Sorrells shows up, he takes Brennan along with Charles Brem and Amos Ewens to the sheriff's department, where he will make out his statement. So we have good photographic coverage of Howard Brennan at the Texas School Book Depository. And it's good coverage. It's not very good quality. That is, you can't identify him by his face in the photographs. But you would think there would be no doubt that that's Howard Brennan at the Texas School Book Depository. And yet the FBI seemed to think that they had to prove that Brennan was actually there, as this document shows. It is noted in an earlier report in this matter that Mr. O.V. Campbell, Vice President and Secretary, Texas School Book Depository, Elm and Houston Streets, Dallas, Texas, advised on November 26, 1963, that while he had not observed anyone fire any shots from his building on November 22, 1963, he had observed an individual wearing a construction-type hat who was talking about seeing an individual fire from the window of the TSBD building, and he noted that a police officer had taken this individual's name. On December 17, 1963, Mr. Campbell advised Special Agent Kenneth B. Jackson that as best as he could recall, this individual was wearing a white helmet and work clothes with possibly red lettering on the helmet. He described the man as white, about 5'9" to 5'10", possibly 165 pounds, and possibly around 35 years of age. He said that this man was talking with a Dallas Police Department officer. A review of information in this matter indicated that the individual observed by Mr. Campbell may possibly have been identical to Howard Leslie Brennan, who has been previously interviewed in this matter. On December 17, 1963, Brennan advised Special Agent Kenneth B. Jackson he was employed with the Wallace Beard Construction Company as a steam fitter, and he was doing prefabrication work at a location to the rear of the Texas School Book Depository building on November 22, 1963. He is still employed with this company, but is now working at the construction site of the Republic National Bank building, Dallas. He stated he continues to reside at 6814 Woodward, Dallas. On December 17, 1963, Brennan was introduced to Mr. O.V. Campbell by Special Agent Kenneth B. Jackson, and neither individual showed recognition of the other at first. Mr. Campbell was of the opinion that Brennan was very likely the person he had referred to as having conversed with a Dallas police officer immediately after the shooting of the President Kennedy on November 22, 1963. He indicated that possibly his recollection of a white construction-type helmet on the individual he had observed could possibly have been a gray helmet, which, according to Brennan, was what he, Brennan, wore on November 22, 1963. With the name of his company, Wallace Beard, stenciled in black letters on the front of the helmet, and at that time a small black name sticker bearing Brennan's name. Mr. Campbell observed a round white badge bearing a number 130 were the words Wallace Beard Republic Bank Tower, and indicated that possibly his recollection of red letters on the white background could have been from observing this badge, which badge, according to Brennan, was worn by him on November 22, 1963, as at the present. The entire badge was not in red lettering, but the large digits 130 in the center were in red. The word Wallace was in blue letters, the word Beard was in red letters, and the words Republic Bank Tower were in blue letters. Brennan furnished his own description as white male, 5 foot 7.5 inches, 155 to 160 pounds, and age 44. And remember that Campbell had said earlier that he thought the man was 35, approximately. As Campbell and Brennan talked to Mr. Campbell, As Campbell and Brennan talked, Mr. Campbell stated he has become a little more sure that Brennan was the individual he had seen conversing with a Dallas police officer on November 22, 1963. Mr. Brennan stated that he was unable to recall Campbell at all, but remarked that he himself had talked to a Dallas police officer at that time and that Campbell could have observed his conversation with the police officer without his knowledge. Brennan did state, however, that he felt reasonably sure that the person referred to by Campbell would have been himself. Now, that badge with the number 130 on it that the FBI was talking about in that document can actually be seen on the construction worker when he's sitting in Inspector Sawyer's car, and you can read the number on it. Now, it's not made clear whether this is an individual number, that is, the number refers to the individual, or maybe it refers to the construction project. I don't know. I would think it probably refers to the individual, that it is an individualized number. But it's interesting that this William Allen photograph, which I would think the FBI had seen, I would think the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, would have known there was a photograph of this construction worker with a badge on him that said 130. I would think they wouldn't need to go through the theater of putting Campbell and Brennan together if they wanted to prove this was Brennan. I mean, if Brennan is really wearing this badge and says he was wearing it on the day of the assassination, all they would have to do is refer to this photograph, and that should prove their case well enough for anybody, if necessary. And as I said before, photography in Dealey Plaza isn't good enough to recognize the face of the construction worker as being the face of Howard Brennan. But another thing about it is that the guy in Dealey Plaza is not wearing eyeglasses, whereas Howard Brennan, when he appears to the Warren Commission and also when he appears on CBS for their documentary in 1964, Howard Brennan is wearing eyeglasses, and he wasn't wearing eyeglasses in Dealey Plaza. So that might be the reason the FBI is concerned, because the photography does not show Howard Brennan wearing glasses. Now, the topic of Howard Brennan's eyesight came up 3 separate times in his Warren Commission testimony, as if the Warren Commission felt the need to stress the fact that he was farsighted and therefore would not have needed to be wearing his glasses in Dealey Plaza. But this is a very muddled issue, because he also tells them that his eyesight isn't good because he got both eyes sandblasted. Presumably he means it was an accident. And yet it's never quite explained why he's wearing his glasses now all the time as a result of having his eyes sandblasted. Would that make you nearsighted? And Mr. Dulles, Alan Dulles, the CIA guy here, specifically asks him in the present tense, "Are you farsighted?" And he says yes. So there should be no reason for Howard Brennan to be wearing his reading glasses, which they never put it in that term. They never say reading glasses. But that's what he says he needs, reading glasses. There should be no reason for Howard Brennan to be wearing his reading glasses all the time now, if he hadn't been wearing them all the time on the day of the assassination. It doesn't make sense that the sandblasting would now require him to wear reading glasses all the time. But whenever we see him anyway, And according to the Warren Commission, he had the eyeglasses with him when he was there. They don't specifically say he was wearing them, but that seems to be the impression. And in his CBS appearances, he wears his eyeglasses as if he wears them all the time. I get the impression, at least, that he's now wearing eyeglasses all of the time, and he supposedly wasn't on the day of the assassination, and yet there's no reason given. There's this thing about the sandblasting which implies that's why he's wearing glasses, but there's really no reason given for why he would now be wearing his reading glasses all the time. A sandblasting accident doesn't really explain that. So this looks to me like something funny is going on, and that the Warren Commission and Alan Dulles know that it's going on, and they're covering it up. So perhaps that's not really Howard Brennan we see in the photography in Dealey Plaza. Perhaps it's somebody else. And for some reason, Forrest Sorrells decided to switch him out, as he did with Amos Ewens, by the way. Sort of. Now, I think this might all have to do with the description that went out on the radio of the suspect. That description was called in on the radio by Inspector Sawyer, and here we see Inspector Sawyer is in the car with the construction worker, and it is presumed that the description came from the construction worker.
The wanted person in this is a slender white male, about 30, 5 foot 10, 165, and carrying what looked like a 30-30 or some type of a Winchester. It was a rifle. A rifle, yes. In the cold description, man. The current witness can't remember that.
So the description comes from Sawyer, and Sawyer had been talking to the construction worker. But then listen to what Sawyer says just a little bit after that.
Well, it was thought that the shot might have come from this building. It's unknown whether he's still there or not. It's unknown whether he was there in the first place.
Sawyer says it is unknown whether the suspect was ever in the building, whether he was there in the first place. So how can this be Howard Brennan's description when Howard Brennan saw the suspect in the window? This suspect was not seen in the window, he was seen outside of the building. And this document says explicitly that that was the case, that this description was of a suspect running from the building, outside of the building. And Amos Ewens told Arlen Spector that a construction worker had told an old policeman that he saw a man running out of the back of the building. And Ewens was in the car when Inspector Sawyer was talking to the construction worker. So I think this construction worker is not Howard Brennan. That this guy is the guy who saw a man with a rifle outside the building, and that's where the description came from that went out on the radio. But the FBI wants us to think that it's Howard Brennan, because they don't want us knowing about the guy running out of the back of the building with a rifle. And so I think that explains all this Howard Brennan mess that I've been talking about here. Maybe Brennan was sitting on the wall, and maybe he did look up at the building and see somebody in the window that he later identified as Lee Harvey Oswald, and maybe he went and told that to the police. But I don't think he was standing on the steps of the school book depository, and I don't think he was sitting in the car with Inspector Sawyer, and I don't think that Forrest Sorrells walked him to the sheriff's department. I think that's somebody else. I think that's the construction worker who was out behind the building and saw a suspect with a rifle running from the building. That was not Howard Brennan.
The wanted person in this is a slender white male, about 30, 5 foot 10, 165, and carrying what looked like a 30-30 or some type of a Winchester. It was a rifle. A rifle, yes. In the cold description, man. The current witness